All right, so this is the video lecture for Lesson 2, Resources, Efficiency, and Economic Systems. And so you recall that when we first defined economics, one way we did so was to say that we're essentially trying to figure out how we make choices, and the reason we make choices is due to scarcity, which means simply a lack of resources. So we're trying to figure out how do we satisfy our unlimited wants with limited resources. Now, in the decisions that you guys make, that we all make on a daily basis, the two biggest resources that we find to be scarce are our time and money. There's so many hours in the day, and there's a million things to do. There's lots of stuff you'd like to buy, but you only have so many dollars in your pocket. Now, in economics, we think about resources more broadly than that. And so if you look at the study guide, you'll see four types of resources that economists think about. The first is what we call land, and this is literally the physical land itself, the physical surface of the earth, but also everything else that we get from the earth. So that could be anything that we grow on the surface, so trees or crops, vegetables, fruits. It could be the land that we use upon which we build houses and buildings. It could be things that we dig up out of the land, such as minerals, oil, petroleum. It could be anything we get from the ocean, right? The fish of the sea. And it could quite literally be, different gases that we pull out of the atmosphere for different uses. So all of these things, the land, the earth, the natural resources, we lump together, we call land. And when someone owns land and they allow it to be used for the production of some good or service, we say that that land is compensated in the form of rents. And typically we think of rent for a house or apartment. Well, what are you paying for? You're paying for the use of some physical space upon which a building has been constructed. All right, so land earns rents. Now, labor is people. That's us. It's the work that we do, and it could be either physical work or mental work. So, a farmer that's out there, toiling in the field, is engaged in physical labor. Me talking to you in this video is mental labor. I'm coming up with ideas and trying to figure out how to communicate them. And so all labor, regardless of what type of labor it is, if it's work done by people, we call it labor, and we say that labor is compensated in the form of wages. Now, capital is a little bit different. Land and natural resources, that occurs naturally. People were from nature, right? Our physical ability or mental ability is natural. But capital is kind of different. And my very technical definition of capital, stay with me, is quite simply stuff that helps make other stuff. Okay? Now, what does that mean? Well, think about taking raw materials from the earth, taking workers. What do the workers need to turn the raw materials into things, into goods and services? And you need tools, machinery, equipment. So all of that type of stuff, all of those physical tools and machinery and equipment, we refer to as capital. And specifically, we call that physical or real capital. It's things that we can, that are tangible. We can reach out and touch these things, and we use them to make other things. We distinguish that from financial capital, which is basically just money and other financial assets, stocks and bonds. If you think about it, you need money to purchase land and labor in order to produce goods and services, just like you need those tools and those machines and equipment to produce the goods and services. So, whenever we talk about capital in economics, we specifically mean that real or physical capital, the tools, the machinery. And just like financial capital, though, we say that physical capital earns interest. So capital earns interest. Now, the last resource is what we call entrepreneurial ability. And this one's a little bit fuzzier. It's not something you can reach out and touch. An entrepreneur is usually someone that we think of as a person who starts their own business. And what they're really doing, though, is they're coming up with an idea, right? They have an idea for a new product, or they have an idea for how to improve an existing product, or maybe they can take an existing product and make the same product but make it in a different way that uses different amounts and different types of resources. So basically it's just ideas. It's the ideas that we come up with. And we are going to say that entrepreneurial ability is compensated with profit. Now, often we think of profit as, what you have left from your revenue after you've paid your cost as a business. And if you think about it, the money that's left over after, you subtract revenue minus costs, is really the compensation for the idea that the company had that led it to produce a product, spend money to acquire land, labor, capital, and then sell it for revenue and hopefully be left over with some profit. So those are our four resources. And the question then is, well, if these are our resources, how are we going to use them? And hopefully at the end of the day, since those resources are limited, we are going to use them in a way that avoids wasting any of them. Because again, how much stuff do we want? Well, we want unlimited amounts of stuff. We have unlimited wants, but the resources are limited. So we have to figure out how to get the most bang for our buck from our land, labor, and capital. So efficiency, broadly speaking, is just the opposite of waste. It's using your resources to the best of your ability. Now we distinguish between two types of efficiency. The first is what we call productive efficiency. And this is more of a kind of microeconomic concept because we're asking ourselves, with respect to a single good or service, we're looking at that one good or service and we're asking, are we producing this good or service using the least costly combination of resources? In other words, are we using the fewest resources possible to produce that product? Okay. Now the other type of efficiency is what we call allocative efficiency, and this is more of thinking in terms of the macro scale, big picture. And to allocate simply means to disperse, to divvy up. So you slice a pie and you give everyone a slice of pie. You are allocating the slices of pie. Well, at the macro level, in terms of efficiency and resources, we're trying to figure out, well, of all of the land, the labor, the capital that we have, how are we allocating those resources? How much of the land, labor, and capital goes to produce cars? How much of that land, labor, and capital goes to produce T-shirts and food and houses and DVDs and everything? So we're not just thinking in terms of just one good or service, we're thinking about all goods and services. And we want to make sure that we're allocating those resources wisely and efficiently. Another way to think about allocative efficiency means we are devoting just the right amount of resources to every single good and service. And if we are doing that, what we're going to see is that we're producing just the right amount of every single good and service. In other words, we're not producing too much of one good, and we're not producing not enough of the other. We have produced what we call the right mix of goods and services. So those are the two types of efficiency that economists focus on. And again, since this is a microeconomics course, we're going to be more concerned with that productive efficiency. And so we'll discuss in more detail how a firm goes about making decisions about what to produce and then what resources they will use to produce that product and how that translates into their costs. Now, the next portion of the study guide, we want to consider 5 economic questions that every society must answer. So we've got resources on the one hand, and we have this long list of things that we want on the other. So the first question that we as a society have to ask ourselves is, well, given these resources, given some endowment of resources, what are we going to make? What are we going to do with all of these resources? So that's the first question, is what to make. Now the second question is, how are we going to make it? Once we've decided what to make, right, we have a long list of goods and services, we've got to figure out just how to make each good and service. And this is going to get at the idea of both productive and allocative efficiency, because hopefully we're going to be making the right combination of goods and services, the right mix, but we're also going to be making each individual good and service in a way that is most productively efficient. So what are we going to make? How are we going to make it? Well, once we've made everything, the next question is, how are we going to distribute it? For whom are we making all of these goods and services? Now, there's different ways of answering that question. It could be a lottery, first come, first serve, and in just a moment we'll talk about 2 economic systems that answer that for whom question, how to distribute, but also the first 2 questions, the what and the how. Now, with the what, the how, and the for whom, a society will answer those questions, and whatever answer they come up with is going to represent what we call an economic system. We're going to have some plan in place to help us as a society figure out what to produce, how to produce it, and then how we're going to distribute it amongst ourselves. Now, once we've got a system in place, though, there's 2 more questions we have to consider about the system itself, about our plan for using these resources. The first is, what if something changes, right? What if we wake up one day and we discover we've used up some of our resources, or we wake up and decide, you know what, we want something different, or we discover a new way to make certain goods and services, right? The question then is, well, is our system that we had yesterday, is it going to be adaptable? Can we still use the same system? Is it going to accommodate the changing environment, the changing world around us? Some systems do, some don't. And then the final question is, once we've got the system in place, we know what we're producing and how we're distributing it, can we do better? Is there a way that we could maybe produce more goods and services or achieve higher levels of efficiency? So in other words, is our economic system one that is capable of promoting progress? Now there are a lot of different ways that we can define and measure progress, and that'll be another question for society. But generally, we just want to think, can we do better tomorrow than we did today? And some systems, some economic systems will be capable of doing that, and others won't. So, what to produce, how to produce it, who gets the stuff for whom, and then how are we going to respond to change, and can we do better going forward? Those are our big economic questions. Now, societies will, again, come up with a game plan that will represent an economic system. And in economics, we generally say that societies fall into one of two categories. Either they operate according to what we call a command system or a market system. And the big difference is between these two systems is who or what is actually answering those questions of what to produce, how to produce it, and for whom. So in a command system, it's a central planning authority, typically, a part of the government. And so if you think back to, countries past and present, such as the Soviet Union or North Korea, Cuba, these were societies where a part of the government, a central planning authority, decided what would be produced, how, and for whom. Now in a market system, it's not one central entity, it's that decision making is dispersed throughout the society. And so we say that it's up to many buyers and many sellers to answer the questions for themselves of what to produce, how, and for whom. So central planning authority defines a command system. Buyers and sellers interacting in a marketplace defines a market system. Now, I'm going to pause there. The next question on your study guide asks what are the major features of the market system and what are the two primary challenges under command system. And I'm going to go ahead and leave that for our meeting on Saturday when we meet face to face. We'll spend just a little bit of time going over that. And then what we're going to do from here is move on to lesson 3, and we're going to look at the market system in more detail. We're going to look at those features of a market system. We're going to look at demand, define what market demand is. We're going to define market supply. We're going to look at the factors that affect both supply and demand. And then we're going to put the two together. And so tomorrow we will construct our first economic model, and we will go through some examples of that together. And then once we feel pretty comfortable with it, then we'll get the first practice problems up so you guys can test your skills at using that model, and we'll go from there. And until Saturday, good luck. And let me know if you have any questions.